This video is by Straight Goods News. SGNews.ca.
I think now the government's trying to attack him. I certainly think Mr. Rathgeber, he's not actually crossing the floor to anybody. He's sitting as an independent. But the issue here is, why is it that the government felt so strong about crushing a bill about some basic transparency and accountability at the upper federal civil service?
But are you surprised, like I guess what Mr. Rathgeber suggested was hypocrisy when he said David Emerson as an example on why they were taking that line?
Hey, well, in the House today, we see the government, they will say anything. They're accusing, they're saying Mr. Rathgeber should step down when, of course, they welcomed in David Emerson. And Mr. Rathgeber, to be clear, he hasn't crossed the floor to anybody. He says that this Prime Minister should betrayed the principles of the Conservative Party, and in good conscience, he can't sit there anymore. It's really unfortunate what they did to Mr. Rathgeber. And my question is, when you have a government that attacks hardworking civil servants who are just getting by, and the middle class, why are they going to such outrageous lengths, even losing one of their own members, to protect people who are making over $400,000 a year and keeping that secret? Well, I think what you're seeing is the wheels are coming off the Conservative bus, and the frustration of Conservatives who came here to do to be accountable and to fight for transparency. I don't always agree with Mr. Rathgeber, but clearly I've spoken with him. He believes in levels of transparency. Why is it that the government would come in, basically kill a bill to hide people who are making over $400,000 a year? That doesn't make sense. We believe we raised questions about whether or not this was to deal with parliamentary staff. We were told it wasn't, but it doesn't make sense. Why is the Prime Minister's office so intent on putting a veil of secrecy over the upper levels of the civil service while trashing on a daily basis the average middle class civil service?
Especially when provinces like Ontario already have a sunshine law, so it's not like they're breaking new ground here.
If you look at what Mr. Rathgeber's trying to do, he said he didn't want a sunshine list. He wasn't trying to do gotcha. He wanted people who are in the upper levels of the civil service who are making big money, that it was accessible. So if there was an issue, you could find out. What the government came along and did was stretch it up to the upper level. $444,000 would be the threshold now. Anything below that is kept secret. Why this desire for secrecy? Why is this fear of openness? This is, I think, frustrating to Mr. Rathgeber, frustrating, I know, to a number of Conservatives, and certainly frustrating to Canadians.
So were you willing to support the private members bill as it was, with the threshold set on $180,000?
We felt there were two major problems with the private members bill. One was on the issue of journalistic sources, that the Conservatives and Mr. Rathgeber hadn't clarified what the protection of journalist activities were. We wanted that clear. Mr. Rathgeber was willing to work with us on that. The Conservatives weren't. On the issue of accountability and transparency, we've run on transparency and accountability, and we think it's fair. It wasn't gotcha. It was a straightforward thing. Access to information is the lifeblood of democracy, but the Conservatives do not believe that.
But the limit on the threshold to expense disclosure, were you comfortable with that, or did you?
I think what Mr. Rathgeber did not want to do a gotcha moment and attack on civil servants. He said $180,000. That's the low level of the first class of deputy ministers. That seemed to be a reasonable step. Others said, well, why not the salary of an MP or the salary of a senator? That could have been looked at as well. But the government instead went to the upper level extreme, so that every other salary is hidden in secret.
Did you vote against the amendments last night in committee?
We voted against the Conservative amendments because, number one, they weren't in the spirit of the bill. They were an obvious attempt to kill the bill. And what we ended up witnessing was the Conservative Party coming in and putting a political horse's head in the bed of Mr. Rathgeber. Here's a man who has a right as an MP to bring a bill. I might not agree with everything, but he has a right to have that debated. It was the New Democrats who brought him back, allowed him to speak. We tried to work with him, but it was the Conservatives who obviously put the political fix in and put the political hit on Mr. Rathgeber. Mr. Rathgeber has never supported the secrecy and the manipulation of facts that's happening in the Prime Minister's office. So I would certainly hope we'd have